Hey, so glad you got here. We were totally waiting for you, just about to listen to a story that begins with a man who decided that ordinary roads simply weren't enough. You know the sort. While everyone else is perfectly happy, arguing over whose goat wandered into whose cabbage patch. And believe me, medieval people could turn that into a discussion lasting longer than a winter storm. There is always one soul staring beyond the hills, wondering what waits just out of sight. Tonight, you're following that kind of fellow, someone who kept asking questions that sensible people avoided, mostly because sensible people enjoyed sleeping indoors. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, tell everyone in the comments where you're listening from and what your local time is. It's always fascinating to imagine this tale drifting through different corners of the world, carried by countless quiet evenings. Now settle in, get comfortable, and just relax. Today's tale starts like this. There was once a man who possessed almost nothing remarkable. He was neither rich enough to attract envy, nor poor enough to earn sympathy. His face blended into every market crowd, every harvest gathering, every village feast. If someone described him from memory, they might confidently mention brown hair, only to discover they had been thinking of another fellow entirely. His name hardly matters now. People remembered what he did far more than what they called him. He lived in a modest village surrounded by fields that stretched like green blankets over gentle hills. Every morning followed the same comfortable rhythm. Roosters announced themselves with far more confidence than talent. Bakers filled the air with warm scents that drifted lazily between timber houses. Blacksmiths greeted the day by striking iron with enough enthusiasm to wake anyone who had hoped for another hour of sleep. The man worked honestly. He mended fences. He helped gather grain. He carried sacks heavier than they appeared, discovering once again that sacks possess an almost magical ability to weigh twice as much after lunch. Some mysteries are simply eternal. His neighbors liked him well enough, not because he spoke often, because he listened. Listening, after all, required far less effort than convincing old farmers. They were wrong about the weather. Every evening he sat outside his small home, watching the western horizon. Not because the sunsets were especially beautiful, although they certainly were. He watched because the hills always seemed incomplete. They looked less like endings and more like invitations. Children imagined castles beyond them. Hunters imagined endless forests. Merchants imagined distant markets overflowing with silver. The man imagined roads, roads that refused to stop, roads that ignored kingdoms, roads that continued beyond every map ever drawn. It was a dangerous habit, not dangerous in the way. Wolves were dangerous, more dangerous than that. Curiosity has persuaded perfectly reasonable people to climb cliffs, sail unknown seas, and taste berries that absolutely should not have been tasted. Curiosity rarely introduces itself politely. It simply whispers. One autumn evening, an elderly traveler arrived. His cloak looked older than several kings. Dust covered every inch of it. His boots seemed held together through determination rather than leather. The villagers welcomed him with food and a warm place to rest, for travelers carried stories worth more than coins. The old man accepted the meal with grateful silence. Only after eating did someone ask the familiar question. "Where have you come from?" The traveler smiled. "Farther than you would believe." The room laughed. Every traveler claimed exactly that. It was almost expected. Another villager grinned. "And where are you going next?" The old man's smile faded. Beyond the world. Silence settled over everyone. Then laughter returned, even louder this time. Someone joked that perhaps he intended to walk straight off the edge of creation. Another suggested bringing a very long rope. The old traveler chuckled softly. "You misunderstand." He stirred the last of his stew. "The world does not end. It simply becomes something else." Most dismissed the words. The man did not. Later, beneath a sky crowded with stars, he found the traveler sitting alone outside. Neither spoke for several moments. Crickets supplied enough conversation. Finally, the man asked quietly, "What did you mean?" The traveler looked toward the dark horizon. "There is an old road. I've walked part of it. It leads beyond kingdoms, beyond empires, beyond memory." The man frowned. "Beyond memory?" The old traveler nodded. "Maps stop first, then history. Eventually, even certainty gives up." The words settled into the night like snowflakes landing upon still water. The man felt something stir deep inside himself. Not fear, recognition. As though he had been waiting years to hear someone describe a place he somehow already believed existed. The traveler continued. "Few seek it. Fewer return. Those who do rarely speak of what they found. Why not? Because words belong to this world. They become rather clumsy afterward." That answer raised more questions than it solved. Which, admittedly, is exactly how mysterious old travelers maintain their reputations. If they explained everything clearly, they'd simply become geography teachers. The following morning, the traveler departed before sunrise. No ceremony, no farewell, only footprints disappearing into mist. Life resumed. Harvest continued. Rain arrived. Winter prepared its annual campaign against warm fingers and dry boots. Yet something had changed. The man could no longer watch the western hills without hearing those quiet words. Beyond the world. He tried ignoring them. He worked harder. He filled longer days with heavier labor. He joined celebrations. He laughed at familiar jokes. He even considered finding a wife, reasoning that marriage often left remarkably little time for impossible journeys. Then he watched one married neighbor spend half an afternoon arguing with a goose over ownership of a vegetable patch. The goose won, quite decisively. The man decided perhaps he should continue thinking first. Months drifted quietly by. Spring returned. Flowers painted the fields with colors that seemed too cheerful to last. Birds nested beneath cottage roofs. Children raced through muddy lanes, pretending sticks were legendary swords. Life offered every reason to remain exactly where he was. Yet every peaceful day strengthened the same uncomfortable feeling. He did not belong to this ending. One afternoon he climbed the tallest nearby hill. The village looked wonderfully small from above. Smoke curled gently from chimneys. Farmers moved like tiny insects across distant fields. Everything appeared peaceful, complete, finished. He turned west. Beyond familiar valleys rose another chain of hills. Beyond those, faint blue mountains touched the horizon, and beyond them, nothing he could see, everything he could imagine. An eccentric belief from medieval pilgrims claimed that standing barefoot upon a hill at dawn allowed a person to hear the oldest road beneath the earth, humming softly beneath stone and grass. Most laughed at the superstition, yet enough travelers quietly removed their boots that the tale never entirely disappeared. The man smiled. Perhaps foolish stories survived because every so often they pointed toward truths too strange for ordinary conversation. The wind carried the scent of distant pine forests. Cloud shadows wandered lazily across open land. He realized something surprisingly simple. The road had already begun, not beneath his feet, inside his thoughts. Every day he remained, it stretched a little farther. Every night it called a little louder. When he descended the hill, his decision had quietly settled inside him. He would leave. Not tomorrow. Not after harvest. Not someday. Soon. He would walk until every map failed, until every familiar name vanished, until he discovered whether the old traveler had spoken truth, or whether curiosity itself had simply become the greatest journey of all. He owned little enough that preparing took only a handful of days. A sturdy cloak, a walking staff, a small knife, a water skin, some dried bread, a blanket. The villagers assumed he planned ordinary travel. No one imagined he intended to keep walking long after ordinary travelers wisely turned around. On his final evening, he stood once more before the western horizon. The setting sun painted gold across distant hills. For the first time in his life, those hills no longer looked unreachable. They looked like the first page of an impossibly long story. And before dawn touched the fields, while the village still dreamed peacefully beneath the fading stars, the man stepped onto the western road without looking back. His journey had finally begun. The road welcomed him with mud. That felt appropriate. Grand journeys, despite what singers insist after too much honey wine, rarely begin with golden light and noble trumpets. More often, they begin with a wet boot, a stiff shoulder, and the sudden realization that dried bread tastes exactly like regret if chewed before sunrise. Still, the man walked. Behind him, the village faded into mist. Ahead, the western road curved between hedgerows silvered with dew. Birds stirred in the thorn bushes, sounding deeply offended that morning, had arrived without consulting them first. For the first few days, everything remained familiar. He passed farms where children stared at him with the solemn suspicion reserved for strangers and turnips. Dogs barked from behind fences. Old women paused their sweeping to watch him go by, clearly deciding whether he was a pilgrim, a fool, or both. Since those categories often overlapped, the judgment was fair enough. He slept beneath trees, wrapped in his cloak, listening to owls ask questions no one could answer. He ate carefully. He drank from streams. He followed cart tracks, then footpaths, then trails that seemed maintained only by deer and optimism. At the first village beyond his own valley, he asked about the western road. The miller there laughed so hard flour puffed from his sleeves. "Roads go places," the miller said. "Then they stop. That's their habit." The man smiled. "And if one does not stop, then it is not a road. It is trouble lying down." That sounded wise enough to be useless. He continued. The land slowly changed. Gentle fields gave way to rougher country where stone walls wandered over hills like confused gray serpents. The soil grew thin. Sheep outnumbered people, and judging by their expressions, they knew it. He crossed a moor where the wind moved constantly, combing through heather and low grass. There he met a peddler, dragging a little cart with one squeaking wheel. The cart carried needles, ribbons, tin cups, cracked mirrors, bone combs, and at least 6 objects whose purpose had apparently been forgotten even by the peddler. "West?" the peddler said when asked. "Oh, west is bad for business." "Why?" "People there buy less." "Because they are poor?" "Because there are fewer of them." The peddler leaned close, smelling of onions and cold rain. "And fewer still who come back." The man waited. The peddler enjoyed that. Some people drink wine, others sip attention. "There are villages beyond the fir woods," he said. "Old ones, quiet ones. Folk there speak of a road older than kings. They say it was laid down before men learned to argue properly." The man considered that. Men learn quickly, I imagine. Too quickly. Terrible habit. The peddler sold him a small twist of salt and warned him not to trust milestones beyond the third valley. Why not? They lie. Stones? Better than most merchants. Then the peddler wheeled his cart eastward, squeaking into the mist, like a mouse with debts. The man walked on. Days gathered behind him. He began to forget the exact shape of his village lanes. Not entirely, but softly, as though memory itself had stepped farther away. He could still picture his doorway, his hearth, the hill above the fields. Yet those images no longer felt like places waiting for him. They felt like scenes painted on the inside of a closed chest. At night he dreamed of roads. In one dream, a road crossed the sky. In another, it ran beneath a frozen lake, pale and smooth below the ice. In another, he walked beside himself, and neither version was polite enough to explain who was real. He woke uneasy, then laughed quietly. Dreams were always dramatic. Give the mind a blanket and darkness, and it immediately hires a troupe of questionable actors. The fir woods rose after the seventh day. Tall trees crowded the hills, their branches knitting shadows so thick that noon became twilight. The air smelled of resin, damp bark, and mushrooms hidden beneath fallen needles. His steps grew softer. Even his breathing seemed too loud. Within the forest he found the first forgotten village. At least, he thought it was a village. Only stone foundations remained, half swallowed by moss. A broken well stood in the center, covered by a slab carved with spiral marks. No smoke rose, no voices sounded. Yet someone had recently tied red thread around several branches near the path. He touched one strand. It fluttered lightly. A warning, perhaps, or a blessing. People rarely labeled such things clearly, which was inconsiderate of them. At the far edge of the ruins, he discovered a milestone leaning beside the road. Words had been carved into it, though weather had eaten most away. One line remained, "Keep walking only if you have already left." He read it several times. Already left what? Home, fear, sense. The last seemed possible. An eccentric custom in some border villages held that travelers should leave a button, pin, or thread before entering unknown woods, so the forest would mistake the offering for part of them and let the rest pass unharmed. No one agreed whether forests were easily fooled. But then again, people also hung horseshoes above doors and expected iron to understand architecture, so belief had always been flexible. The man took a loose thread from his cloak and tied it to a branch. It seemed polite. Beyond the ruins, the path narrowed. He walked through miles of forest where no birds sang. Once, he heard an axe striking wood somewhere far away. He followed the sound for nearly an hour, hoping to find a hut, but it always remained the same distance off. At dusk, rain began. Not heavy rain, worse, the patient kind, the kind that seeps into seams, sleeves, thoughts, and eventually the soul. He found shelter beneath an overhanging rock and sat wrapped in his damp cloak, eating bread softened by weather. Somewhere nearby, water dripped with maddening regularity. Drip, drip, drip. A king could have confessed crimes under that sound. Near midnight, he saw light. A lantern moved between the trees. He stood slowly, hand around his staff. The lantern approached along no visible path. Behind it walked a woman bent with age, wearing a hood of dark wool. Her face was sharp, her eyes bright. "You are late," she said. The man blinked. "For what?" "For arriving." That explained nothing, confidently. She gestured. "Come then. Wet men make poor conversation and worse furniture." Her hut stood in a hollow. He was certain had not been there before. Smoke curled from its roof. Inside, herbs hung from beams. A little fire burned blue at the heart before settling into ordinary orange, as though embarrassed by showing off. She gave him broth in a wooden bowl. He thanked her. She watched him drink. "You seek the road beyond maps." He lowered the bowl. "I seek a road." Men never seek just roads. What do they seek then? Permission to become someone else. The broth was warm and bitter. He said nothing. The old woman nodded as if silence had answered well enough. "You will come to 3 valleys," she said. "In the first, people will tell you to turn back because they fear for you. In the second, because they fear what follows you. In the third, no one will tell you anything. Why? Because no one remains there long enough." The fire snapped softly. He thought of the old traveler, the laughing miller, the peddler with his squeaking cart. "Have you seen this road?" The woman smiled. "I have seen men after it sees them." That was not comforting. But then, truth rarely cares whether it arrives wearing comfortable shoes. By morning, the hut was gone. He woke beneath the same overhanging rock, dry cloak folded beside him, wooden bowl resting near his hand. No footprints marked the mud. The road continued west. He lifted his pack and followed it through the dripping trees. Behind him, a raven croaked once, sounding exactly like someone clearing their throat before delivering bad news. The man did not turn. Ahead beyond the fir woods, 3 valleys waited beneath a sky the color of old pewter. And somewhere past them, if every rumor had not lied, the road would begin forgetting the world that had made it. The first valley opened gently. That was suspicious. Places with warnings attached ought to look the part. Jagged rocks, black clouds, perhaps a wolf standing on a ridge with excellent timing. Instead, the valley lay green and mild beneath a soft morning sky, with sheep grazing peacefully and a stream running through grass, bright enough to seem newly invented. The man almost felt disappointed. Then his left boot sank ankle-deep in mud. There it was, balance restored. A small village rested beside the stream, its houses built low against the wind. Smoke rose from chimneys. A child chased chickens through a yard with the hopeless confidence of someone about to learn humility. Nearby, an old man mended a net, though there was no lake in sight. The traveler asked for water. The villagers gave it freely. They also gave him bread, cheese, and the kind of concerned looks usually reserved for people climbing roofs during thunderstorms. "You are walking west," said the old man with the net. "I am. That is not wise. So I have heard. Then hear it again. It may improve with repetition." The man smiled faintly. The villagers gathered around him slowly, not with hostility, but worry. A woman with flour on her sleeves told him the mountains ahead whispered at night. A shepherd claimed he had heard his dead brother calling from a ravine, asking for shoes. That seemed oddly specific, but grief has strange manners. Another man said paths changed while you walked them. Changed how? You begin on stone and end on snow. In the mountains, that happens. Not in summer. That was harder to dismiss. They begged him to stay at least one night. Since refusing shelter merely to prove stubbornness was a hobby best left to younger fools, he agreed. That evening they fed him barley stew and sour apples cooked with honey. Someone brought out a fiddle with only 3 strings, which did not stop the player from attacking it bravely. The tune staggered around the room, survived by pure luck, and somehow became pleasant after the 3rd cup of ale. The traveler listened more than he spoke. They told him old tales of the mountains west of the valley, of caves where echoes answered before a person shouted, of goat bells ringing from cliffs, where no goat had ever survived, of a ridge called St. Orlan's Spine, though no one remembered who St. Orlan had been, except that he apparently had a very uncomfortable spine. An eccentric belief among mountain folk claimed that echoes were not returning voices, but borrowers of words. Speak too carelessly in high places, they said, and the mountain might keep your sentence for 100 years before giving it to someone else at a very inconvenient moment. The man asked whether anyone had crossed the mountains recently. The room quieted. Finally, a woman near the hearth said, "A monk came through in spring." "From the west?" She nodded. "What did he say?" "Nothing at first. Then he asked whether the moon was still the same size." A silence followed. That was the trouble with strange answers. They entered a room and sat down heavily. In the morning, the villagers tried once more to persuade him to turn back. They did not mock him. That would have been easier. They feared for him, and kindness has a sharper hook than scorn. But he thanked them, filled his water skin, and walked toward the mountain pass. By midday, the green valley fell away behind him. The path climbed through pine woods, then above them into slopes of loose stone and wind-bent shrubs. Clouds dragged their bellies across the peaks. The air thinned, crisp and cold, carrying the scent of snow, hidden somewhere beyond sight. His legs began complaining. His lungs joined in. His shoulders submitted a formal grievance. He ignored them all with the noble patience of a man who had no better option. By evening, the mountains rose around him like sleeping giants tucked beneath gray blankets. He found a ledge sheltered by rock and made a small fire from dry twigs collected lower down. The flame struggled bravely in the wind, which seemed personally offended by warmth. Then the whispers began. At first he thought them distant streams, then insects, then leaves. But there were no trees nearby, and the sound shaped itself almost like speech. Almost. That was the worst kind. Clear words could be answered. Meaningless noise could be ignored. Almost words hovered at the edge of understanding, scratching softly at the mind. He lay awake beneath his cloak, staring at stars between rushing clouds. Once he heard his own name, or something close to it, the name he no longer thought mattered. He sat up. The mountains fell silent. "Very funny," he muttered. No answer came, which was somehow worse. The next day, he met the first hermit. The man appeared above the trail, standing barefoot on a rock despite the cold. His beard reached the middle of his chest and contained, unless the traveler was mistaken, several small feathers and one twig that seemed to have settled in comfortably. "You are not the raven," the hermit called. "No." "Good. He owes me an apology." "For what?" "He knows." The traveler decided not to pursue that. The hermit invited him to a cave nearby, where he kept a clay lamp, dried roots, and a collection of smooth stones arranged in circles. On one wall, charcoal markings showed lines, spirals, and symbols that resembled maps drawn by someone who distrusted directions. "You climb too high," the hermit said. "I must cross." Must is a proud little word, struts around like a rooster with borrowed feathers. The traveler accepted a cup of bitter tea. The hermit pointed at the western wall of the cave. "Beyond the spine, roads thin. They remember less. So do men." I was warned. Warnings are blankets in winter, useful, but never enough. The traveler studied the charcoal marks. "Are these paths?" "Some. And the others?" "Mistakes." "Why keep them?" The hermit smiled. "So I do not make them lonely." Outside, wind moved across the stones with a low humming sound. The hermit leaned closer. "When the mountains speak, Do not answer in your own voice. What should I answer with? Silence, if you have any. That night, the traveler slept in the cave and dreamed of his village again. But in the dream, every door stood open, and no one lived inside. Bread cooled on tables. Fires burned low. Tools lay abandoned where hands had dropped them. He woke before dawn, heart heavy and cold. The hermit was gone. Only the teacup remained, placed beside a little pile of ashes. The traveler left the cave and climbed higher. Snow appeared in shaded cracks. The path narrowed until one careless step would send stones rattling down into empty blue air. He moved slowly, one hand against the cliff, his staff tapping ahead. Sometimes the echo came back before the tap landed. He tried not to think about that. Near noon, he reached St. Orlan's Spine. It was a ridge of black stone arsing between two peaks, thin as a blade and slick with frost. Clouds swirled below, hiding the valleys. Above, the sun glimmered pale as a coin seen through water. Halfway across, he heard laughter. Not from ahead, not from behind, from below. A child's laughter. Then a woman's voice singing. Then the old traveler from months before, whispering, "The world does not end." The man stopped. His fingers tightened around the staff. The ridge trembled softly beneath him, or perhaps his legs did. Both had reasonable excuses. He wanted to answer, to ask how far, to ask why, to ask whether anyone truly returned. But he remembered the hermit. Silence, if you have any. So he closed his mouth. The voices circled like birds denied crumbs. His mother's voice came next, though she had been dead many years. She spoke gently, calling him home for supper. That nearly broke him, not because he believed it, because part of him wanted to. He stood in the freezing wind and let the ache pass through him. Then he continued walking, step by careful step. At the far side of the ridge, the whispers ended all at once. The silence that followed seemed enormous. He looked back. The ridge had vanished behind cloud. Ahead, the mountains descended into a barren western slope where no trees grew. Far below, a road wound through pale stones, straight and narrow, shining faintly beneath the afternoon light. It did not look built. It looked remembered. The man took a long breath. He had crossed the mountains that whispered, and somewhere within those heights, he had left behind the last easy chance to turn back. The western slope was quieter than the mountains, not safer, just quieter. There is a difference, and anyone who has ever watched a cat stare at an empty corner knows it perfectly well. The man descended through pale stones that shifted beneath his boots with soft, dry clicks. No birds circled overhead. No insects buzzed in the sparse grass. Even the wind seemed to move carefully here, as though afraid to disturb something sleeping beneath the earth. The road below waited for him, straight, narrow, almost white. When he finally reached it, he crouched and touched the surface. It was not stone, not packed clay, not chalk. It felt smooth and cool, like bone left in moonlight. No cart ruts marked it. No moss grew along its edges. No weeds dared interrupt it. He looked back toward the mountains. Clouds had swallowed the pass entirely. Ahead, the road stretched across a wide plain, running west toward a distant shimmer. Water, perhaps, or light, pretending to be water. By then, he had learned not to trust anything too quickly. He walked. For 3 days, the road crossed empty land. He saw no farms, no shepherds, no huts. At night, the stars looked strangely sharp, as though the sky had moved closer. His fire burned low and blue before reluctantly becoming orange, just like the old woman's hearth. That was uncomfortable. A man prefers fire to behave predictably. Fire already eats wood and dances without legs. It need not develop moods. On the fourth morning, he smelled salt. The scent arrived faintly at first, hidden beneath cold air. Then it grew stronger, sharp and clean, until gulls appeared like scraps of torn cloth against the sky. Their cries startled him. After so much silence, even gulls sounded theatrical. By noon, he reached the sea. But it was not any sea known to his childhood maps. The coast curved in a long crescent of black sand. Waves rolled in slowly, each one bright silver beneath a sun, veiled by white mist. The water did not crash. It breathed, in and out, with the steady patience of something much older than weather. No harbor stood there, no town. Only 7 huts built from driftwood stood above the tide line, their roofs weighed down with stones. Nets hung between poles, though no fish lay drying nearby. A row of boats rested upon the sand, narrow and dark, each carved from a single trunk. Beside one boat sat a fisherman mending a net with deliberate hands. The man approached. "Good day." The fisherman did not look up. "Is it?" The traveler glanced at the colorless sky. "I hoped you might know." That earned the smallest smile. The fisherman's face was deeply lined, browned by wind and salt. His beard had gone white, but his fingers moved quickly through the net. Around his neck hung a charm made of shells and small bones, polished smooth. "I seek passage west," the traveler said. The fisherman tied a knot. "West is wet, so I see. Wetter the farther you go. That is often true of seas, and yet men keep needing it explained." The traveler sat on a stone nearby, because standing while being quietly mocked felt undignified. "Do boats cross from here?" "Sometimes." "To where?" The fisherman pointed into the mist. "There." The traveler waited. Nothing further arrived. Apparently, the answer considered itself complete. Soon, 2 more fishermen emerged from the huts. Then a woman carrying a basket of empty shells. Then a boy with eyes too solemn for his narrow face. None seemed surprised by the traveler. None asked his name. That troubled him more than suspicion would have. The woman gave him a strip of dried seaweed and a cup of warm broth that tasted of salt, smoke, and something like sorrow. He thanked her. She nodded toward the sea. "It is not on maps." "The island?" "The water." He looked out across the strange silver waves. "Why not?" Mapmakers dislike admitting ignorance. They draw monsters instead. Very convenient. If no one returns, blame the monster. That seemed entirely believable. An eccentric habit among certain coastal folk was to throw the first fish of a catch back into the sea with an apology, not as an offering, but because they believed fish kept ledgers. Supposedly, a rude fisherman might one day be dragged before a cod court and judged by creatures with excellent memories and no mercy. The traveler found this idea ridiculous, though he decided privately to remain polite to fish. By evening, the tide had not changed. The water breathed in and out, but the line of foam stayed fixed upon the sand. "Does it never rise?" he asked. The old fisherman looked toward the waves. "Not for us." "For whom, then?" "For those leaving." At sunset, the boats began to creak. No hands touched them. Still, one by one, they shifted slightly toward the water. The villagers watched. The traveler felt the hairs on his arms rise. "Choose one," said the fisherman. "Which?" "The one that chooses you least rudely." That was not a standard he had encountered before. He walked along the row. The first boat rocked away from him. The second groaned softly, which he took personally. The third split down one side with a sharp crack. The fifth smelled strongly of rotten kelp, and he decided destiny could surely do better. The seventh remained still. Inside it lay a single oar. No sail, no provisions, no comforting explanation. Of course. He returned to the fisherman. "How long is the crossing?" "Until it ends." "You speak like a man paid by the riddle." "I am underpaid." The traveler almost laughed. Almost. The fisherman helped push the seventh boat toward the water. As soon as its hull touched foam, the tide surged around it with sudden hunger. The black sand vanished beneath rushing silver. The old fisherman gripped the traveler's arm. "Do not sleep when the stars go out." "What happens then?" "You may dream someone else's dream." "And if I do?" "Row." The man stepped into the boat. It rocked gently beneath him. He looked back at the 7 huts. The people had already begun turning away, as though farewell belonged to a custom they no longer practiced. Only the boy watched. "Have you crossed?" the traveler called. The boy shook his head. "Have you seen anyone return?" The boy nodded once. "What were they like?" The child thought for a moment. "Smaller." Before the traveler could ask what that meant, the boat slid backward into the sea. No wave pushed it, no rope pulled it. The shore withdrew. Mist gathered. Soon the black sand became a dark line, then a memory, then nothing. The man took the oar and rowed west. The water was strangely heavy, resisting each stroke as though reluctant to be parted. The boat moved anyway. Around him the sea glimmered silver under fading light. No birds followed. No fish disturbed the surface. Night came slowly. Stars appeared above. Then, below. He looked over the side and saw them shining beneath the water, clearer than those in the sky. For a dizzy moment, he felt as though the boat floated between 2 heavens, and if he leaned too far, he might fall upward or drown in constellations. So he sat very still. A practical choice. Heroes often leap, shout, and wave swords at mystery. Tired travelers grip the boat and avoid dramatic nonsense. Near midnight, he heard singing. Low voices moved across the water, not mournful exactly, but distant and layered, like many people humming behind a closed door. The tune rose and fell with the breathing sea. He rowed. Clouds covered the sky. One by one, the stars vanished overhead. Then the stars beneath the water went out. Darkness became complete. He remembered the warning. Do not sleep when the stars go out. His eyelids grew heavy at once, which felt unfair. The body has terrible timing. Tell it not to sleep, and suddenly it behaves like a spoiled prince denied a cushion. The singing changed. He saw, or thought he saw, the village of his birth reflected in the water. Dawn smoke, open doors, familiar fields. A figure stood on the hill, looking west. Himself, or the version that had stayed. That man looked peaceful. Older, perhaps. Content. The traveler gripped the oar. The boat drifted. The dream below brightened. For one dangerous breath, he wanted to climb into it. Instead, he rowed. Once, twice, again. The reflected village shattered into ripples. The singing faded. Far ahead, a pale shape rose from the dark sea. Land. An island. Its cliffs glowed faintly beneath a moon he could not see. The boat carried him toward a narrow inlet where still water waited between black rocks. When the hull finally scraped stone, dawn had not come, yet the darkness had thinned. The man stepped ashore unsteadily. Behind him, the boat drifted away without farewell. Before him, a path climbed between cliffs toward trees whose leaves looked gray in the half-light. He had crossed a sea no map had named, and above the inlet, Carved into the rock in letters worn nearly smooth, he found these words: "All shores are also doors." The path from the inlet climbed slowly. That was merciful. After a night spent rowing across water that contained far too many opinions, the man appreciated any road that did not immediately demand heroics. His legs shook, his shoulders ached, and his hands had curled around the oar so tightly that his fingers seemed surprised to be free again. The cliffs rose on either side, black and damp, veined with pale mineral lines that glimmered like old scars. Gray trees waited above, their branches motionless, though the sea wind pushed at his cloak. No birds called from them, no leaves rustled. The island appeared to be holding its breath. At the top of the path, he found a meadow. At least, it had once been a meadow. The grass was silver white, soft beneath his boots, and scattered with flowers whose petals were almost transparent. When he touched one, it folded shut like an eye deciding not to trust him. Fair enough. He trusted very little himself by then. Beyond the meadow stood a village. Unlike the ruined settlement in the fir woods, this one remained whole. Stone cottages formed a loose circle around a dry fountain. Smoke rose from several chimneys, thin and pale. Tools leaned beside doorways. A wheelbarrow stood beside a garden of white cabbages. Somewhere, a loom clacked softly. Yet when the man entered, no one greeted him. People moved through the village with quiet purpose. A woman swept the same step again and again, though no dust remained. A man carried firewood from one side of the lane to the other, then back again. Two children sat beside the fountain, stacking smooth stones, knocking them down, then stacking them in the same order. Their faces were calm, too calm. The traveler approached the woman with the broom. "Good morning." She paused, looked at him, smiled politely. "Is it?" He nearly laughed, remembering the fisherman. Perhaps everyone west of the mountains had attended the same school of unhelpful conversation. "I have just come ashore." "Have you?" "Yes." "That is nice," she resumed, sweeping. He waited. The broom moved across clean stone. "Can you tell me the name of this village?" The woman stopped again, her brow creased. "The name?" "Yes." She looked around at the cottages, the fountain, the pale trees beyond. Then she smiled apologetically. "It was here yesterday." "The village?" "The name." His stomach tightened. He thanked her and moved on. Near the fountain, the children watched him. "What are you building?" he asked. "A tower," said one. "A wall," said the other at the same time. They looked at the stones, puzzled. "Perhaps both," the traveler offered. That seemed to comfort them. A man emerged from the nearest cottage carrying a bowl of porridge. He had broad shoulders, kind eyes, and the expression of someone who had misplaced a thought and hoped it would wander back politely. "You are new," the man said. "I am passing through." "Everyone says that at first." The traveler looked toward the road beyond the village. "And later?" The man considered. "Later. We say less." He invited the traveler inside. The cottage smelled of oats, peat smoke, and dried herbs. A small fire burned in a hearth. On the walls hung wooden masks, each painted with a different face. Some smiled, some frowned. One appeared deeply offended by existence. The traveler studied them. "Are these for festivals?" The man followed his gaze. "I think so." "You think?" The man set down the bowl. "I made them." "Then surely you know." "I remember carving them. I do not remember why." That settled over the room like cold fog. The man offered him porridge, and the traveler accepted. Refusing food in strange places felt rude, though accepting it in strange places often felt foolish. Hunger, however, has a persuasive legal argument. The porridge tasted plain, but warm. "How long have you lived here?" the traveler asked. The host opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the fire. "I remember rain." "That is all?" "And a bell." "What kind of bell?" "A little one. Around a goat's neck, maybe. Or in a church, or in my hand." He gave a helpless smile. "Funny thing, memory. You think it is a chest. Then one day you open it and find someone has borrowed the bottom." The traveler thought of his own village, the hill, the western road. His name, already softer in his mind than it should have been. Outside, the loom kept clacking. An eccentric tradition once held that masks could store forgotten moods. In certain remote places, people carved faces during winter and hung them near the hearth, believing sadness, envy, or fear might climb into the wood instead of staying in the body. This was probably nonsense, though after meeting a man who forgot why he carved them, the traveler decided nonsense deserved more respect. After eating, the host walked with him through the village. No one seemed unhappy. That troubled the traveler most. If grief had filled the place, he could have understood it. If madness had ruled, he could have named it. But this calm forgetting was stranger than sorrow. It was gentle, patient, almost kind. At the dry fountain, an old woman sat knitting with no yarn. Her needles clicked together steadily. "What are you making?" the traveler asked. She looked down at her empty hands. "Oh." Then she laughed softly. "I was sure it was nearly finished." Her laugh was not bitter, only distant. He asked whether anyone knew the way across the island. The villagers glanced at one another. A young man pointed toward the gray forest. "The road goes there." "Where does it lead?" "Through." "Through what?" He shrugged. "Through itself, mostly." The traveler had received worse directions, but not many. Before he left, the woman with the broom approached him. She held out a small wooden token carved like a face without features. "For the path," she said. "What does it do?" "I do not remember." "Then why give it?" Her eyes softened. "Because I remember that I should." He accepted the token. It felt warm in his palm. At the village edge, he turned back. The people had returned to their quiet tasks, sweeping clean steps, carrying wood, stacking stones, knitting nothing, living, if it could be called that, in the soft ruins of themselves. He wanted to ask why they stayed. Then he understood. Perhaps they had forgotten. Leaving was possible. The thought chilled him more than the sea. He entered the gray forest. The trees grew close together, their bark smooth and pale as ash. The path twisted between roots that did not break the soil, but lay across it like sleeping serpents. Every few steps, he saw things hanging from branches, ribbons, buttons, locks of hair tied with thread, little scraps of parchment, blank from age, offerings, or remains. He walked carefully, holding the faceless token. The forest was not silent. It murmured, not with whispers like the mountains, with memories. A woman laughing, a boy crying over a broken cup, a man shouting a wedding vow, someone humming while grinding grain. Small human sounds drifted among the trunks, each one bright for a moment before fading. Then came his own, the creak of his cottage door, the bark of a dog he had known as a child, the blacksmith's hammer from his village, his own voice, younger, asking his mother whether roads ever became tired. He stopped. The token in his palm grew warmer. The path ahead split into three. At the left, he smelled bread from home. At the right, he heard the sea. In the middle, there was nothing, no sound, no scent, no promise. He chose the middle path. because by then he had learned that comfort often opened its arms widest when it wanted to keep you. The forest thickened. Behind him, the sounds of memory rose sharply, almost pleading. He did not turn. His feet moved one after another through silver grass and pale roots until the murmurs faded. At last, he reached the far side of the trees. The land beyond sloped downward beneath a strange sky where dawn and dusk seemed braided together. In the distance, impossible hills rolled beneath patches of snow, summer flowers, autumn leaves, and spring mist all at once. The man looked back only once. The forest had vanished. In his hand, the faceless token had cracked down the middle. He slipped it into his pouch. The island of forgotten faces lay behind him. But as he walked into the land ahead, he realized with a quiet fear that he could no longer remember the name of the first woman who had ever taught him a song. The land ahead did not understand seasons. That was the first problem. Spring mist drifted across one hill, while just beside it, summer grass blazed under golden light. A little farther on, autumn leaves spun through the air without trees to explain them. Beyond that, snow lay in blue shadows, crisp and untouched, though the breeze carried the warmth of late harvest. The man stood at the edge of it all and sighed. Of course, he murmured, because apparently one season at a time had been too simple. He stepped forward. Cold touched his left hand. Warmth settled on his right shoulder. A bee passed his face, then vanished into falling snow with the doomed confidence of a creature that had not read the weather properly. The road continued beneath him, though it looked less certain now. Sometimes it was pale stone, sometimes packed earth, sometimes only a line where grass leaned westward, as if pressed down by travelers long gone. He followed anyway. After the island, he kept testing his memory. His village, still there. The hill, still there. His mother's face, blurred at the edges, but present. The first song she had taught him remained missing. He could feel its absence like a lost tooth his tongue kept finding. By noon, or something pretending to be noon, he reached an orchard. Apple trees stood in full blossom on one side and heavy fruit on the other. Some branches were bare and black with winter. Others dropped red apples into grass, already crowded with fallen petals. A farmer sat beneath one tree, eating an apple and watching snow settle on his boots. "Morning," said the farmer. "Is it?" "Probably somewhere." The man accepted that. The farmer wore a straw hat, a wool scarf, and gloves with the fingertips cut away. A sensible outfit, if the world had lost a wager. "Does this road lead west?" the traveler asked. "It leads where it is leading." "That is not helpful." "No, but it is hard to disprove." The farmer tossed him an apple. The fruit was warm from sunlight on one side and icy on the other. He bit into it carefully. It tasted both tart and sweet, crisp as autumn and fragrant as spring. His stomach, less philosophical than his mind, approved. "How long have you lived here?" he asked. The farmer scratched his chin. "Depends which part of the field I stand in." The traveler looked across the orchard. "You mean time passes differently?" "Time passes how it likes. Always has. Back where you come from, folk just bully it with bells." That was irritatingly reasonable. An eccentric notion among some medieval clock keepers claimed that time disliked being measured and would punish proud towns by making their bells crack, their candles gutter, and their roosters crow at foolish hours. The traveler had once laughed at this. Now, after meeting a farmer who harvested apples in 4 seasons at once, he felt clocks had perhaps been braver than anyone knew. The farmer warned him not to sleep under flowering branches. Why? You wake younger. That sounds useful, only until your knees forget walking. The man moved on. He crossed fields where rain fell upward from puddles into clouds. He passed a pond frozen at one end and full of frogs at the other. He saw deer with winter coats grazing beside butterflies. Once, he watched a single tree shed leaves, bloom, fruit, and freeze in the time it took him to drink from his water skin. It should have terrified him. Instead, after a while, it became strangely soothing. The world had stopped pretending to be tidy. There was honesty in that. Toward evening, he came upon a village built along both banks of a narrow river. On the eastern bank, children played beneath spring blossoms. On the western bank, old people sat near fires while snow covered the roofs. Between them, on the bridge, adults crossed constantly carrying baskets, tools, babies, firewood, and expressions of permanent inconvenience. He stopped a woman hauling a sack of flour. "May I sleep here tonight?" "Which night?" "The one approaching." She glanced at the sky, where half the clouds glowed pink and half were dark with stars. "That narrows it poorly, but yes." They gave him a place in a barn that smelled of hay, sheep, and old rain. Before sleep, he joined villagers at a long table near the bridge. Their meal was a confusion of seasons: fresh peas, roasted roots, summer berries, winter ale, spring cheese, wrapped in leaves. A bald man with a beard divided neatly into two braids explained the village custom. Children live east of the river until they are ready. Elders live west when they are tired. The rest of us go back and forth. Does crossing change your age? Not exactly. It changes what part of you is loudest. The traveler watched a girl carry soup across the bridge and return walking, more slowly, face thoughtful. "Why stay?" The braided man shrugged. "Every place is strange if you examine it too closely. At least here the turnips grow honestly confused." A woman beside him raised her cup. "To confuse turnips." Everyone drank. The traveler did too, because some toasts deserve support. He slept uneasily. In his dreams, he walked down a road lined with doors. Behind each door was a day from his life. Some he recognized: his first fever, his father's burial, a summer spent repairing a roof, one golden afternoon when he had done nothing at all and somehow felt rich. Other doors were blank. He reached for one. It opened before his hand touched it. Inside sat the old traveler who had first spoken of the road beyond the world. The old man looked up. "You are late," the traveler frowned. "So everyone keeps saying. You have been walking longer than you think." "I know." "No," said the old man gently. "You do not." He woke before dawn, though dawn had difficulty committing. Outside, frost silvered half the barn door, while warm rain tapped the other half. He left before the village stirred, careful to cross neither bank more than necessary. The road west climbed into hills where the seasons blurred further. Flowers grew through snow. Ripe grain bowed beneath icicles. His cloak grew damp, dried, froze, warmed, and dampened again until it seemed personally exhausted. By the third day, routine began to dissolve. He could not tell whether he had walked an hour or a week. Hunger came oddly. Sometimes he felt starving, moments after eating. Sometimes a full day passed before his belly remembered its duties. Sleep arrived in pieces. He would close his eyes beneath summer stars and wake under gray winter light, uncertain whether minutes or months had slipped away. He started marking his staff with notches, one for each waking. Soon the marks seemed too many, then too few. Then one notch vanished. That made him sit down for quite a while. Rude, he told the staff. The staff offered no defense. Near the edge of a yellow field dusted with snow, he found a stone arch standing alone. No wall held it, no building surrounded it. Through the arch he saw not the field beyond, but a narrow street paved with dark stones. On the far side, lamps burned though no hands tended them. A city waited, empty perhaps, or watching. The road passed straight through the arch. The man touched the pouch at his side, feeling the cracked faceless token from the island. He thought of the farmer, the river village, the dreams of doors, the song he could no longer remember. Then he stepped beneath the arch. The seasons fell silent behind him. The air changed. Cool stone replaced wet earth beneath his boots. Before him stretched a deserted avenue lined with tall houses, whose windows reflected no sky at all. And somewhere far within the city beyond memory, a bell rang once, not to mark the hour, to announce his arrival. The bell's sound rolled through the empty avenue and faded into streets that seemed far too eager to receive it. The man stood beneath the stone arch, listening. No answering bells rang, no doors opened, no startled face appeared at any window to complain about noise, which was unusual. In any proper city, one bell was enough to summon priests, bakers, dogs, and at least 3 old men convinced the youth had ruined everything. But here, nothing moved. The city rose around him in tall, narrow houses built from dark stone. Their roofs leaned toward one another, almost touching over the street, so the sky above became a thin gray ribbon. Carved faces watched from lintels and corners, lions, owls, saints, kings, and creatures. No mason should have invented before breakfast. The road continued down the avenue. He followed it. His footsteps sounded too loud. Every door was closed. Every shutter latched. Yet the city did not feel abandoned. That was the trouble. Ruins had a certain honesty. They admitted people were gone. This place seemed paused, like a storyteller holding a breath for dramatic effect and then forgetting to continue. At the first square, he found a market. Stalls stood neatly arranged beneath faded awnings. Apples filled one basket, perfectly red, without rot or scent. Cloth hung in bright folds that never stirred. A butcher's table displayed no meat, thankfully, only knives polished so clean they reflected his face poorly. He touched an apple. It collapsed into gray dust. Naturally, he whispered. Even fruit had become theatrical. At the center of the square stood a fountain. Water arced from the mouth of a stone swan into a basin below. The stream looked clear, but made no sound. When he placed his fingers beneath it, they remained dry. An eccentric belief in certain medieval towns held that fountains remembered every wish ever thrown into them. That was why some people refused to toss coins, claiming a greedy fountain might spend your desire badly. Looking at the silent water, the man wondered how many wishes had drowned here without even making a splash. On the fountain's rim, someone had carved words. "We lived loudly once." The man read them twice. Then the echo came, not a mountain echo, not a memory like the forest. This sound rose from the stones themselves. Voices filled the market square, sellers calling prices, children laughing, wheels rattling, a woman arguing fiercely over onions, a man swearing by 5 saints that his fish were fresh despite all available evidence. The traveler turned. For a heartbeat, the square shimmered full of people. A crowd rushed past him in pale fragments of color. A girl chased a hoop. A merchant lifted a scale. 2 monks inspected cheese with grave suspicion. A dog stole something round and escaped like a professional. Then all vanished. The square stood empty again. The man exhaled slowly. "So," he said to the fountain, "you do remember." The city gave no reply. He continued. Every street preserved another echo. In a lane of workshops, hammers struck anvils no longer there. Bellows sighed. Sparks flashed and disappeared before touching the floor. In a courtyard, invisible students recited lessons in a language he nearly understood. In a chapel, candles burned with cold white flames before blinking out as he approached. He began to understand. The city had not forgotten. It had been forgotten. There was a difference as wide as the sea. People vanished when they forgot themselves, but places vanished when others ceased to carry them. This city remained only as an imprint, a hollow pressed into the edge of the world by lives. No one remembered to mourn. Near midday, though light never truly changed, he found a library. Its doors stood open. Inside, shelves climbed 3 levels high, packed with books chained to lecterns. Dust covered everything in soft gray fur. The air smelled of leather, ash, and old silence. The man had never been much of a reader. In his village, books were rare enough to be treated like visiting nobles, admired, avoided, and suspected of hidden expense. Still, he understood that a city with a library had intended to last. He opened one volume, blank pages. Another, blank. A third contained letters, but they crawled away from his gaze like ants fleeing sunlight. At the back of the hall, one book lay open beneath a cracked window. Its ink had not faded. He leaned close. The page showed a map, not of countries, of absences. There was the coast of 7 huts, marked only by a shell. There was the island of forgotten faces, marked by a mask. There was the land of sideways time, marked by a broken circle. And west of the city stood a gate drawn in black ink, tall and narrow, with no wall around it. Beside it, a note. The keeper asks what you carry. The man felt inside his pouch. Bread nearly gone. Knife. Salt. Cracked faceless token. A few memories, less secure than before. He turned the page. There, in careful handwriting, someone had written a list of names. Hundreds, perhaps thousands. Each name crossed out. At the bottom, one line remained uncrossed, though the ink trembled as if afraid to finish it. A man who would not stop walking. He stepped back. The library darkened. From the shelves came whispers, but not speech. Pages stirred though no wind entered. Chains rattled softly. He left the book open and walked out into the street with his heart beating hard. The city watched him now. He could feel it. Every carved face seemed turned a little more toward him. Windows reflected his movement, though no glass should have caught so much light. Somewhere, far away, the bell rang again. Once, not arrival. This time, warning. He hurried west. The streets narrowed, twisting around towers, under bridges, through archways carved with worn symbols. The echoes grew louder. A wedding procession passed through him like mist. Soldiers marched without feet. A woman leaned from a window and laughed at someone below. A child cried for his father. Then the echoes changed. They began speaking to him. "Stay," said one voice. "Remember us," said another. "Carry us." The man slowed. 1,000 lives pressed near, not touching him, not harming him, only asking. That was worse. Harm could be resisted. Need entered through softer doors. "I cannot carry a city," he whispered. The voices trembled. For one moment, every empty window filled with faces. Not clear faces. Suggestions of faces. Hopeful, desperate, lonely. He wanted to promise something. A story, a prayer, a place in his thoughts. But he already felt his own memories loosening. How could a cracked cup promise to hold the sea? So he did the only honest thing. He bowed his head. "I saw you," he said. "That much is true." The faces faded. The street opened into a final square. At its center stood no fountain, no statue, no market cross. Only a milestone, black stone, white letters, "Beyond memory, ask what remains." Behind it, the western gate waited. Not the gate from the map exactly, but close enough to trouble him. It rose from the pavement without wall or hinge, made of 2 upright stones, and 1 across the top. Through it lay a road under a sky darker than dusk. Beside the gate sat a figure in a gray cloak, still as a carved saint. The man approached carefully. The figure lifted its head. Its face was hidden beneath the hood. "You are late," it said. The man closed his eyes briefly. "Of course I am." The cloaked figure gave a quiet laugh, dry as turning pages. The city behind him held its silence. The road ahead waited beyond the impossible gate, and the keeper, whoever or whatever it was, raised one hand toward him. "Then come," it said softly. "Let us see what you have not yet lost." The keeper did not stand. That somehow made it worse. A threatening guardian should rise, loom, perhaps carry a weapon large enough to suggest deep personal insecurity. This one simply sat beside the gate in its gray cloak, one hand resting on a crooked staff, hood shadowing its face completely. The man stopped a few steps away. Behind him, the forgotten city waited without breathing. Before him, the gate framed a road under a sky darker than dusk. "What are you?" the man asked. "A keeper." Of the gate? Of questions. That was already annoying. The keeper tilted its hood slightly. "Gates are easy. People make them difficult." The man could not argue with that. People had made ordinary doors difficult by inventing locks, taxes, and relatives who arrived without warning. He tightened his grip on his staff. "The book said you ask what I carry." The book remembers old habits. "And do you?" "I ask when asking is useful." The keeper extended one pale hand. "Show me." The man opened his pouch. He laid out what remained: a crust of bread, a small knife, a twist of salt, the cracked faceless token, and a strip of cloth torn from his cloak. The keeper considered them. "These are things." "Yes." "I did not ask what things you bring." The man sighed softly. "Of course not." "What do you mean then? What walks with you when your hands are empty?" The square seemed to grow colder. The man looked at the objects on the stone. He thought of the village he had left, the whispering mountains, the nameless sea, the island where people forgot their faces, the land where seasons had mislaid their order, the city that had begged to be carried. "I carry curiosity," he said. "Many do." "I carry fear." "All do." "I carry memories." "Fewer than before." That struck cleanly. The keeper reached toward the cracked token, but did not touch it. "Do you know why the island forgets?" The man shook his head. "Because it is merciful. Some travelers arrive already broken by what they have seen. The island loosens what would tear them apart. Those villagers seem trapped. Mercy often looks like a locked room from outside." The man disliked that answer because he suspected it was not entirely wrong. An eccentric belief among old gate wardens held that every threshold had a small appetite. A doorstep nibbled hesitation. A church door swallowed pride. A prison gate ate hope. Most people laughed at this naturally, while still pausing before certain doors, as though something unseen had asked for a toll. The keeper leaned on its staff. "Why do you seek beyond the world?" The man had imagined this question many times. He had prepared grand answers, without admitting it. To know. to see, to discover whether the old traveler spoke truth. But beneath the keeper's silence, those answers felt thin as onion skin. At last he said, "Because I could not bear not knowing." The keeper nodded. "Better. Better than what?" "Better than pretending it was noble." A laugh escaped him before he could stop it. The sound startled the square. For a moment, distant city windows flashed with faint light as if amused despite themselves. The keeper lifted its hood. The face beneath was not monstrous. That almost disappointed him. It was old, smooth, and difficult to place. Not man, not woman, not young, not ancient. Its eyes were dark and kind in the manner of deep wells, useful, calm, and not something one should fall into carelessly. "Listen," said the keeper. "Beyond this gate, the road does not belong wholly to the world that shaped you. Names will matter less. Hunger will change. Time will become a rumor. You may continue, but you cannot cross unchanged. I have already changed. Not enough." The words were not cruel. That made them heavier. The man looked through the gate. The road beyond seemed narrow and silver, leading across a plain where no stars shone. Far away, something pale moved near the horizon. Perhaps mist, perhaps mountains, perhaps the first shape his mind could make from what had no shape at all. "What happens if I turn back?" "You return with most of yourself." "Most?" "No road gives full refunds." That sounded exactly like something a merchant would say while hiding bad grain beneath good. The keeper gestured toward the city. "You could stay here." "In the forgotten city? It needs witnesses." "I cannot carry it." "No, but you could become part of what remains." The man imagined walking those silent streets forever, listening to echoes, becoming another pale face at a window whenever a future traveler passed. There was a strange comfort in it, to be useful to the forgotten, to stop losing pieces of himself on roads that never promised kindness. But comfort, he had learned, could become a net. "What is the third choice?" he asked. The keeper smiled. "Good. There is almost always a third choice, though people rarely notice because they are busy choosing between two tragedies." It tapped the staff once on the stone. "You may give something willingly before the gate takes something without manners." The man swallowed. "What?" "That is yours to know." He looked down at his possessions again. Knife, salt, bread, token, cloth. None felt sufficient. The gate did not want things. It wanted weight. He thought first of fear. Could he give that away? The idea seemed tempting, but foolish. Fear had kept him from stepping off cliffs, drinking bad water, and accepting suspicious mushrooms from men named after animals. Fear was not the enemy. It was an unpleasant advisor with occasionally excellent points. Curiosity, without it, he would become hollow. Memories, he had already lost too many. Then he understood. He knelt beside the pouch and removed the strip of cloth from his cloak. It was plain brown wool, frayed at one edge, torn during the climb through the mountains. He held it between his fingers and thought of his village road at dawn, the moment he left without looking back. He had told himself that leaving meant courage. Perhaps it had, but it had also meant pride. A belief that the world behind him was too small, a quiet scorn for those who stayed. He had hidden it under longing and called it destiny. The man placed the cloth before the keeper. "I give up the thought that returning would mean failure." The keeper was still. Then it bowed its head, a rare offering. It feels smaller than it should. Most true things do. The gate shivered, not visibly. He felt it through the stones beneath his knees, through the handle of his staff, through the air against his teeth. The keeper gathered his remaining items and returned them to the pouch, leaving the cloth on the ground. "You may pass." The man stood slowly. "What are the old beliefs around this road?" The keeper looked toward the gate. "Some say it was laid before the first kingdom, when the world was still deciding its edges. Some say it is the path walked by the sun, before dawn learned discipline. Some say it is only a crack in certainty, widened by every soul who refuses a simple answer." "And you?" "I say roads are made by walking." "That sounds ordinary." "Yes, ordinary things become terrifying when followed honestly." The city bell rang once more behind him. This time, softer, almost farewell. The man stepped toward the gate, then paused. "Have you seen the old traveler who came before me?" "I have seen many old travelers." He said the world becomes something else. The keeper's eyes darkened gently. He returned, "Yes." "Then believe him carefully." That was not comforting, but comfort had become rare currency. The man passed beneath the stones. For one heartbeat, he felt every threshold he had ever crossed: his mother's doorway, his cottage, the village gate, the forest path, the boat's edge, the city arch. Each one touched him and vanished. Then the forgotten city was gone. The keeper was gone. The gate was gone. Only the road remained beneath a vast, starless sky. The man walked forward, carrying less pride than before, which made his pack no lighter, but his breathing strangely easier. Behind him, somewhere beyond memory, a strip of brown wool lay on cold stone. Ahead, the last horizon waited. The road beyond the gate was almost too clear. That disturbed him. After forests that murmured, seas that reflected impossible stars, villages that forgot their own names, and mountains with the manners of nosy ghosts, a simple road felt downright suspicious. It stretched ahead in a pale line across dark ground, smooth beneath his boots, faintly luminous without moon or sun to explain it. The sky above was empty, not cloudy, not night. Empty. A dark, endless vault without stars, birds, wind, or the comforting movement of anything that could be blamed for making small noises. The man had not realized how much he depended upon the sky doing something. He walked with his staff in hand. No grass bordered the path. No stones broke the plain. The ground on either side looked like packed ash, though it left no mark when touched. After an hour, or a day, or whatever time had become here, he stopped and turned around. The gate was gone. Of course it was. A gate polite enough to remain visible would clearly have violated local custom. He continued west. Soon, the horizon appeared. At first, it was a faint silver line where road and darkness met. Then it widened, not like sunrise, but like a blade being slowly drawn from a sheath. The air grew thin and bright. His shadow stretched before him, though no light source stood behind. As he walked, ordinary rules loosened gently. His pack grew weightless, then heavy, then weightless again. His footsteps sometimes sounded before he took them. Once, he saw himself far ahead on the road, small and bent beneath his cloak. He stopped. The other figure stopped. He raised his hand. The distant man raised his. Then both continued, carefully pretending that had been normal. Hunger faded. Thirst faded. Sleep did not come, though weariness remained like an old dog, following at his heels. He began speaking aloud, partly to keep hold of himself, and partly because silence had become smug. "I am walking west," he said. The words fell flat. "I came from a village." The plain listened. "I crossed mountains." No answer. "I am not lost." That one felt less convincing. An eccentric superstition among long-distance pilgrims claimed that if you feared losing your way, you should speak your destination into your sleeve and tie the cuff shut. The cloth would remember even when your mind wandered. The man almost laughed at the thought. Then, with no one to witness his dignity slipping quietly into a ditch, he whispered, "Beyond the world," into his sleeve, and nodded it. It helped, a little. The silver horizon rose higher. Eventually, the road began to slope upward, though the plain remained flat. His body felt the climb, but his eyes denied it. Each step seemed to lift him closer to the bright line, until the ground ahead simply stopped. He approached slowly. There it was, the last horizon. Not a cliff exactly. Not a wall, a boundary. The road ended at the edge of a vast brightness, a shining emptiness that stretched farther than sight. Below it, above it, within it. None of those words behaved properly. It was not light, as he knew light. It did not glare. It invited and erased at once. He stood at the brink. Wind rose for the first time. It came from ahead, cool and soft, carrying no scent at all. The man looked down. There was no down. That was inconvenient. A person likes down. Down may be painful when met too quickly, but at least it is honest. Across the brightness, faint shapes drifted, fragments of hills, rooftops, trees, rivers, stars, perhaps memories, perhaps things, waiting to become real. He saw a child's wooden cup spinning slowly beside a crown, beside a flock of birds made of smoke, beside a door with no house around it. Then he heard the keeper's voice, not behind him, but inside the pause between breaths. "You cannot cross unchanged." The man reached into his pouch. The cracked, faceless token was warm. He held it in his palm. For a moment, the blank face seemed to shift, not into features, but into possibility. Every face he had known trembled there. The old traveler, the fisherman, the woman with the broom, the farmer beneath the apple tree, the villagers who had begged him not to climb, his mother, himself. He understood then that the horizon was not asking whether he dared step forward. It asked whether he accepted that no step could ever be undone. That sounded dramatic, yes, but roads had a talent for turning common facts into ceremonies. Every walk changes the walker. Most roads simply do it slowly enough that people blame age, weather, or disappointing cheese. He breathed in. He thought of returning, not as failure now, as possibility. That mattered. Then he stepped beyond the edge. For one impossible instant, he fell in every direction. The road vanished beneath him. His staff floated beside his hand. His cloak billowed without wind. He did not scream, which surprised him. Perhaps fear had grown tired. Perhaps his body had finally accepted that screaming at reality was like arguing with rain. Satisfying, but rarely productive. Brightness folded around him. He saw his village from above, tiny beneath morning smoke. He saw the mountains from within, riddled with hollow chambers where echoes slept in nests. He saw the nameless sea, shaped like an eye, slowly opening. He saw the forgotten city, glowing faintly, held together by one traveler, saying, "I saw you." Then all of it stretched into threads. The threads crossed, tangled, loosened. He passed through them. Something brushed his face. Rain. No. Snow. No. Dust from stars that had not yet been lit. He landed standing, softly, absurdly. His boots touched grass. He opened his eyes. The world beyond the horizon was quiet, not empty, quiet. Before him spread a landscape washed in pale gold. Hills rolled beneath a sky filled with slow-moving lights. Not stars exactly, but seeds of light drifting like lanterns underwater. Grass grew blue-green, bending though no wind moved it. In the distance, white trees stood along a river that shone without reflecting the sky. The road continued behind him for 3 steps. Then it faded. He turned quickly. Nothing remained but grass. The last horizon was gone. A laugh escaped him, weak and breathless. "Very good," he said to no one. "Excellent little trick." No one answered. But far away, something rang. Not a bell this time, more like a single note sung by stone. He walked toward it. The grass made no sound beneath his boots. Each blade straightened after he passed, as if refusing to remember being stepped on. The air tasted clear, almost sweet, and too clean for lungs, accustomed to smoke, sweat, and medieval rooms where everyone believed ventilation was a personal insult. After some distance, he found a stream. Its water ran uphill. He watched it for a while. "Naturally," he said. He knelt and drank. The water was cold and tasted faintly of apples, rain, and something he almost recognized from childhood. For a heartbeat, he remembered the lost song's first 3 notes. Then they vanished again. He sat back, shaken. The realm was beautiful. That was undeniable. But beauty here did not comfort. It seemed untouched by human need, which made it strangely lonely. No footpaths crossed the hills. No smoke rose. No walls leaned under age. Nothing had been repaired badly by tired hands. Nothing smelled of bread or sheep or spilled ale. It was a place before use, before habit, before people had arrived to ruin things lovingly. He followed the river. The single ringing note sounded again, closer now. Around a bend, he saw a field of stones. Tall white stones stood upright across the grass, hundreds of them, each smooth and uncarved. They did not mark graves. He knew that somehow. They marked waiting. At the center stood one stone darker than the rest. Upon it lay an oar, the same kind he had used crossing the nameless sea. Beside it rested a shepherd's bell, a broken clock hand, a monk's sandal, a child's hoop, and a crown made of tarnished bronze, offerings from other travelers. He placed the cracked, faceless token among them. The moment it left his hand, the token became whole, still blank, but whole. The ringing note faded into silence. The man stood among the stones beneath the drifting lights. He had crossed the last horizon. Behind him, the known world had become unreachable. Ahead, the impossible realm waited without promise, without map, and without the slightest concern for whether he understood it. So he took up his staff and walked on. He walked through a place untouched by human hands. That was the wonder of it, and also the unease. Back in the world he knew, everything bore marks. A broken fence, a muddy track, a wall repaired by someone who had clearly believed straight lines were optional. Even wilderness carried signs of living things gnawing, nesting, trampling, scratching, shedding, or making poor decisions near berries. Here, nothing had been used. The hills rolled perfectly beneath the pale sky. The white trees stood along the river with smooth trunks and leaves like folded silver. No branch had snapped, no fruit had fallen and bruised, no animal tracks crossed the grass. The world beyond the world looked newly breathed into being and then left alone. It made him feel very loud, even though his steps made no sound. He followed the river upstream. Though upstream was a matter of opinion, when the water happily climbed slopes without embarrassment. The current moved clear and bright over stones that glowed faintly beneath the surface. Small lights drifted within it, like trapped stars too lazy to burn properly. He bent close once and saw images in the water, not reflections, possibilities. A town he had never visited. A woman planting beans in a field of red soil. A knight removing his armor beside a quiet lake and weeping into both hands. A fox asleep inside a ruined chapel. Then the river smoothed, and all images vanished. "Nosy water," he murmured. It did not deny the charge. As he walked, the air changed in subtle ways. Sometimes it smelled of rain before rainfall. Sometimes of bread not yet baked. Sometimes of smoke from fires no one had lit. The scents passed through him gently, each one tugging at memories he could not fully name. He tried again to recall the lost song. 3 notes came, then silence. He hummed them anyway. The sound drifted across the grass and returned softer, not as an echo, but as if the land had tasted it and decided not to spit it out. That felt promising. Or deeply rude. With this place, either seemed possible. By what might have been afternoon, he reached a grove where the white trees grew in a circle. At the center lay a pool perfectly still. Above it, the drifting lights gathered, sinking low until they hovered like lanterns held by invisible hands. He approached carefully. A figure stood beside the pool. Not the keeper, not human either. It was tall and slender, shaped almost like a person made from mist, bark, and pale flame. Its face had no fixed features, only suggestions that changed when looked at directly. Antlers of light rose from its head, branching into sparks that slowly fell and vanished. The man stopped. The figure turned. "Traveler," it said. Its voice sounded like leaves moving under snow. The man bowed slightly. Because when uncertain whether a creature is a spirit, a prince, or an unusually dramatic tree, politeness is a sturdy bridge. "I mean no harm. Few do." That answer left far too much room. The figure touched the pool with one long finger. Ripples spread without disturbing the surface. "You carry the scent of endings. I cross the horizon. Then you carry beginnings too." He considered that. "I suppose those often arrive in the same cloak." The figure made a sound that might have been laughter, if laughter had grown in moonlight. An eccentric belief among certain woodland monks claimed that the first trees had been taught patience by stones, and that this was why forests outlived kingdoms without looking especially impressed. The traveler had once thought monks spent too much time alone. Standing before this shining grove, he decided they may simply have been listening to the right trees. "What is this place?" he asked. A pause. Between what? Between what has been named and what has not. That seemed accurate and unhelpful, a fine local tradition. The figure gestured toward the pool. "Look." The man hesitated. He had learned that looking into strange waters rarely improved a day. Still he looked. At first, he saw only darkness, then shapes formed. He saw mountains before paths crossed them, seas before sails cut their skin, forests before axes, before shrines, before frightened children imagined monsters and kindly grandmothers confirmed them for educational purposes. He saw the world young, not peaceful, never that. Storms raged, fires spread, rivers tore valleys open, great beasts moved beneath enormous skies. But no one had yet called anything property. No one had built borders. No one had stood before a hill and declared that the hill now owed taxes, which surely confused the hill. The vision shifted. He saw people arrive, small fires, songs, footprints, burials, fields, roads, walls, laughter, war, bread, names, always names. People named rivers, then forgot the rivers had existed before the words. They named forests, then feared them less. They named stars, then used them to cross dark seas. They named each other, and with names came memory, grief, love, and responsibility. The man stepped back from the pool. His eyes stung. Why show me this? The figure tilted its shining head. Because you walked beyond the world, seeking what lies outside it. And there is no outside untouched by what you bring. He looked around at the flawless grove. But this place has no human marks. Now it has yours. The words were soft. They struck hard. He looked down. Where his boots had stood, the grass bent. This time, it did not rise. 2 clear footprints remained, small, ordinary, enormous. The man felt suddenly ashamed, though he had done nothing wrong except exist with feet. The figure seemed to understand. Do not mourn the mark, only know it. The pool darkened again. The drifting lights rose back into the sky. The man sat beneath one of the white trees and rested. The figure remained nearby, neither watching nor leaving. That was oddly companionable. Some silences are empty bowls, others are warm blankets. This one was the second kind. He ate the last of his bread. It tasted stale, stubborn, and wonderfully familiar. A few crumbs fell into the grass. Tiny birds appeared at once. At least, he thought they were birds. They were no larger than walnuts, with feathers like blue smoke and eyes bright as dew. They hopped around the crumbs, inspected them, then looked at him as if deeply unimpressed by his culinary standards. "Fair," he said. "It was never excellent bread." They ate it anyway. One perched on his boot and sang 2 notes, the first 2 notes of the lost song. The man froze. "Again," he whispered. The little bird tilted its head, considered union terms, and flew away. Naturally, even in impossible realms, birds remained committed to being difficult. He laughed softly. The sound loosened something in him, not memory, not yet, but fear. He stayed in the grove until the sky dimmed from pale gold to deep blue. No sun had set. The lights above simply changed their minds. When he rose to leave, the figure by the pool spoke once more. "Follow the river. I have been. Soon it will ask you a question. Does everything here ask questions? Only what hopes to be answered." He bowed again. "What happens if I answer poorly?" The figure's face shifted into something almost kind. "Then you will answer again elsewhere." That comforted him more than certainty would have. He left the grove, following the river through blue grass under slow lights. Behind him, the white trees stood unchanged except for 2 footprints and a few missing crumbs. The silence ahead deepened, not hostile, expectant. And as the river curved toward distant dark hills, the man felt the untouched world around him becoming not less strange, but more intimate, as if each step taught it how to include him without yet knowing whether that was mercy or mistake. The river widened as he followed it. At first it ran no broader than a cart track, clear and quick over glowing stones. Then it spread between soft banks of blue-green grass. Then it became wide enough that the far side blurred behind silver mist. Still, the water climbed gently uphill, as if the river had heard what rivers were meant to do and quietly chosen rebellion. The man respected that. After everything he had seen, a sensible river would have felt almost disappointing. He walked along the bank beneath a sky filled with drifting lights. The air remained calm, but the mist moved across the water in long veils. Sometimes it gathered into shapes, towers, trees, faces, animals with too many legs to be anyone's good idea. Each shape dissolved before he could name it. Naming mattered here. He felt that now. Back in the known world, names were handles people tied to things so they could drag them into conversation. Here, naming felt heavier, almost dangerous, as if a careless word might fasten a thing too tightly and hurt it. So he spoke little. His own silence had changed too. It no longer felt like loneliness. It felt like listening. After a while, the riverbank dipped into a shallow marsh. Pale reeds grew there, each one tipped with a tiny bell-shaped flower. When he brushed past them, they chimed softly, not randomly, in rhythm. 3 notes. The same 3 notes from the song he could not remember. He stopped breathing. The reeds chimed again. 3 notes, then a pause. He tried to hum the next part. Nothing came. The river flowed uphill beside him, bright and patient, which was irritating. Patience is lovely in saints and very smug in water. An eccentric tale among reed cutters claimed that river reeds remembered songs drowned in their waters. Some cutters refused to harvest near old crossings, fearing they might weave grief into baskets by mistake. Most townsfolk laughed at them, while still preferring baskets from dry fields. People are brave until laundry gets involved. The man continued through the chiming reeds. Soon he saw figures on the water. Boats. Dozens of them. They drifted without oars or sails, long and narrow, made from pale wood that seemed grown rather than carved. In each boat sat a passenger. Some looked human. Some did not. One was shaped like a woman made of rain. Another like a child with hair of white feathers. Another resembled an old soldier, except his shadow stood beside him, separately, leaning on its own spear. A creature like a stag lay folded in one boat, antlers trailing sparks across the water. None spoke. The boats moved beside the bank at the traveler's walking pace. He felt watched, though not judged. At last, one boat turned toward shore. Its passenger was a small old man wearing a robe patched with scraps of many colors. His beard was braided into 7 tiny braids, each tied with a different bead. His eyes were bright and amused, as though the universe had once told him a joke, and he was still deciding whether to forgive it. "Walking?" the old man asked. "So far." "Ambitious. The river dislikes being ignored. I was told to follow it. Following and listening are cousins, not twins." The boat touched the bank without sound. The old man patted the space before him. "Come aboard." The traveler hesitated. "Where does it go?" The old man grinned. "Where you are going, unless you behave spectacularly." That seemed fair. He stepped into the boat. It did not rock. The moment he sat, the bank slipped away. The boat joined the current and glided uphill with the others. The water made no sound against the hull. "I am called Marrow of Reeds," said the old man. "Is that your name?" "Today. And tomorrow?" "Depends who remembers me." The traveler nodded slowly. "Names again." "I had a name," he said. "Most do. I have not used it in a long time. Then it may be resting." "Can names rest?" "Everything rests when not shouted at." That felt wise enough to be suspicious. They drifted through mist. The other boats kept near, their passengers silent. The old man opened a pouch and removed several seeds, tossing them into the river one by one. Each seed struck the surface and became a tiny image: a cradle, a broken sword, a loaf of bread, a burning tower, a blue cup, a kiss given in farewell. "What are those?" the traveler asked. "Payments. For passage? For having lived." The traveler looked at the old man's hands. "What did you sacrifice to come here?" Marrow of Reeds smiled sadly. "My last certainty. And was it worth it?" "Some days." That was perhaps the most honest answer he had heard since leaving home. The river narrowed between black hills. Above them, The drifting lights disappeared, and the mist glowed from within. The boats moved single file now. Water rose on either side like polished glass walls, showing not reflections, but memories. The traveler saw people in the river walls, the old fisherman mending nets, the broom woman sweeping, the farmer with the impossible apple, the keeper beside the gate. Then, strangers, kings, beggars, children, thieves, monks, mothers, dancers, fools, and one very angry goose that looked prepared to win another argument. The old man spoke softly. Every traveler sacrifices something invisible. I have lost memories. Lost, yes, but loss is not always sacrifice. What is the difference? Sacrifice is loss with witness. Loss alone becomes hunger. The traveler held that thought carefully. The boat moved on. What did the fisherman lose? He asked. His direction. He knows shores, never destinations. The villagers on the island? The sharp edge of grief. The keeper? Marrow of Reeds looked toward the mist. The right to enter. That silenced him. Ahead, the river widened suddenly into a vast dark lake beneath no sky. The boat spread across it like fallen leaves. In the center rose a bridge made of water, arching impossibly upward. The old man nodded toward it. The river's question waits there. Can you tell me what it asks? I could. Will you? No. Because I must answer myself? No. Because spoiling questions is rude. The traveler gave him a flat look. The old man chuckled. Also yes. Because you must answer yourself. The boat climbed the water bridge. At the crest, everything stopped. The river ceased flowing. The mist froze. The other boats hung motionless around him. Even his breath paused in his chest without hurting. From the water beneath him came a voice. Not loud, not deep, not human. It asked, "What will you not surrender?" The question entered him like cold through wool. He thought of his belongings. Too easy. He thought of pride, already given. Fear, still useful. Curiosity, still burning. Memory, already fraying. His name, resting somewhere beyond reach. What would he not surrender? His first answer rose quickly. Home. But was that true? He had left it. His second answer came softer. The wish to return. But even that might change. He sat in the still boat while Marrow of Reeds watched with kind eyes. At last, the traveler understood. I will not surrender the truth that what I leave behind still matters. The river remained silent. He continued, voice steadier. Even if I forget faces. Even if roads carry me farther than memory can follow. The village mattered. The people mattered. The city mattered. The crumbs, the songs, the foolish arguments, the broken fences. I will not call them small just because I walked beyond them. The water beneath the boat brightened. Marrow of Reeds smiled. A costly answer. Is it accepted? The river moved again. The boat slid down the far side of the water bridge. I would say yes, said the old man, unless the river is being sarcastic, which happens less often than with goats, but more often than with priests. The traveler laughed softly. The other boats resumed their silent drifting. At the far bank, Marrow of Reeds guided the boat to shore. Walk from here. Will I see you again? Probably not in this shape. Thank you. Remember the answer, even when you forget the question. The traveler stepped onto the bank. Behind him, the boats drifted into mist. The old man raised one hand. Then he and the others faded, like breath from glass. Before the traveler stretched a narrow path between dark hills. The river turned away, flowing upward into silence. He stood alone, lighter and heavier at once. Every traveler sacrifices something invisible, the old man had said. The man touched his chest. He did not yet know what the river had taken, but he knew what it had left. And with that small, stubborn certainty, he walked onward into the hills, where the path bent toward a deeper unknown. The path between the dark hills climbed without hurry. That made it worse. A steep climb gives a man something honest to complain about. His knees can grumble, his lungs can riot, and everyone understands the arrangement. But this path rose so gently that exhaustion arrived like an uninvited guest who had slipped inside, taken a chair, and begun eating the good cheese. The man walked on. Behind him, the river had vanished into mist. Ahead, the hills folded around the path, their slopes covered in short black grass that shimmered faintly when touched by the drifting lights above. No birds moved here, no water sounded. Even his staff seemed quieter against the ground. At first, he thought the river had taken nothing. Then he tried to picture the old fisherman's face. He remembered the lines, the white beard, the charm of shells and bones, but not the eyes. He stopped. He searched harder. Nothing. Only a blur where expression should have been. The man stood very still. Then he tried the woman with the broom. Her hands came back clearly, her voice, her patience sweeping, but her face was gone. He tried the farmer beneath the apple tree. Gone. The keeper. Gone. His mother. He did not try at once. Fear placed a hand over that door. He walked until the path leveled out on a ridge. From there, he saw a valley below filled with tall stones, each one thin as a finger and dark as wet ink. They leaned in different directions, like a crowd listening poorly. The road passed through them. Of course it did. He descended. With every step, memories loosened. Not all at once. Not dramatically. There was no thunder, no voice declaring a curse, no helpful sign saying, "Attention, your past is now leaking." That would have been considerate. Instead, little things vanished. The smell of his village bakery, the color of his father's coat, the name of the dog that used to sleep outside the smithy. He remembered that there had been a dog. He remembered liking it. He could not remember what anyone had called it. "Unfair," he whispered. The stones gave no answer. An eccentric belief in some villages claimed that names should never be spoken too often near wells, because deep water grew fond of them and might keep one. Children laughed at this until someone forgot what they had come to fetch, at which point every grandmother within 5 miles looked smug for a week. The man entered the field of leaning stones. As he passed the first, a sound rose from it, a lullaby, not his lost song, another, a mother's low humming. The second stone whispered a prayer. The third laughed like an old man with no teeth. Each stone held a fragment, not his alone. Thousands of travelers had passed here, and pieces of them had caught upon these dark stones like wool on thorns. He understood then what the river had taken. Not a memory entire. The faces. The river had left him events, meanings, voices, but taken the clear shape of those who had guided him. It was a cruel mercy. Faces were anchors. Without them, people became stories. Still precious, yes, but farther away. The man pressed both hands to his eyes. He tried then, finally, to see his mother. For one breath, he could. Her hair pinned back, her tired smile, her fingers dusted with flour. Then the image wavered. He clenched his jaw. "No," the valley listened. "No," he said again, louder. The stones began to hum. He pulled from his pouch the small knife, the twist of salt, the empty wrapping that had once held bread. Useless things, dear things, proof that he had belonged to hunger, weather, roads, Ordinary needs. He found a flat stone near the path and knelt. With the knife, he scratched a mark into its surface. Not a name. He could not risk losing what remained by forcing it into words. Instead, he carved a small hill beneath a rising road. Crude work. Any mason would have wept into his apron, but it was his. Under it, he carved 3 notes as simple lines for the beginning of the lost song. Then he pressed salt into the grooves. "Remember this," he told the stone. The hum quieted. For a moment he felt foolish. Then one of the dark stones nearby answered with 3 soft notes, the same 3. The man laughed once, shaken and grateful. "There you are," he whispered. "Not the whole song, but a thread." He stood and continued. The valley grew narrow. The leaning stones crowded closer until he had to turn sideways to pass between them. Each brushed his cloak with a dry, whispering touch. Memories pressed against him, not only his own. First loves, last words, debts unpaid, bread shared, doors closed, hands released. It would have been easy to drown there. Not in sorrow exactly, in importance. Every life, when touched closely, becomes enormous. Every little moment insists upon being carried. A chipped cup, a winter cough, a joke told badly, a promise made beside a fence. The world is stuffed with meaning like a mattress overfilled with straw, lumpy and impossible to fold neatly. He could not carry it all. He had already told the city that, but he could refuse to despise it. That was his answer. That remained. At the far end of the stones, he found a mirror standing alone. Its frame was made of pale wood, carved with leaves that seemed almost to move. The glass showed no reflection. The path ended before it. Behind him, the stones hummed. Before him, the mirror waited. He approached. The glass brightened. A face appeared, his own, but younger. The man he had been before leaving home stared back with clear eyes, ordinary cheeks, hair not yet roughened by strange weather. He looked almost plain enough to disappear in a market crowd. The traveler felt unexpected tenderness. He had not thought kindly of that man. He had considered him unfinished, trapped, asleep. Now he saw someone who had been brave in smaller ways, someone who had listened, someone who had worked, someone who had watched hills and dared admit longing. The reflection spoke. Was it worth losing me? The traveler closed his eyes. There was the heart of it, not whether the journey was wondrous, not whether the road was true, whether wonder justified the selves abandoned to reach it. He opened his eyes. "I did not lose you," he said softly. "I became answerable to you." The reflection studied him. Then it smiled, not proudly, sadly, kindly. The mirror cracked from top to bottom. Through the crack came pale light and the scent of rain on warm fields. The man stepped back as shards fell silently into grass. Where the mirror had stood, a new path opened down the other side of the ridge. His memories still hurt. His missing faces remained missing, but something inside him had steadied. Identity, he realized, was not a chest filled with perfect keepsakes. It was a fire carried through weather, sometimes bright, sometimes smoke, sometimes nearly gone, but still his duty to shelter. He walked down from the valley of stones, humming 3 notes under his breath. They were not enough. They were everything he had. The path descended into a plain of pale grass. After the valley of stones, even emptiness felt merciful. No voices clung to his cloak. No memories scraped themselves against his ribs. The air lay still, silver and cool, and the drifting lights above had grown fewer, as though the sky were slowly putting away its lanterns. The man walked with the 3 notes tucked beneath his breath, not sung loudly, not bravely, just carried. Sometimes that is enough. Ahead, something rose from the plain. At first, he thought it was a hill, then a tower, then a ruined castle. As he drew nearer, it became all 3 and none of them. Stone terraces climbed in wide circles toward a central height. Broken walls stood without rooms. Stairs led nowhere, then elsewhere, then back upon themselves with the smugness of architecture that had never met a practical mason. At the summit stood a throne. He saw it long before reaching it, dark against the pale sky, waiting, naturally, because after walking beyond the world, surviving a river with opinions, and losing several important pieces of himself, what a tired man truly needs is mysterious furniture. He climbed. Each terrace held objects: a rusted sword laid beside a child's wooden horse, a bishop's ring, a cracked begging bowl, a merchant's scale, a harp missing all strings, crowns, helmets, sandals, prayer beads, dice, keys, broken cups, folded letters, and one spoon, so beautifully polished that it seemed extremely proud of having survived history. An eccentric medieval rumor claimed that spoons were sometimes buried with kings so they could dine in the afterlife without borrowing from saints. Whether saints lent spoons was hotly debated by people with too much winter and not enough occupation. The man passed them quietly. These were not treasures. They were answers people had brought and abandoned. At the summit, the throne stood alone. It was carved from black stone veined with white, broad enough for a giant, simple enough for a monk. No jewels decorated it. No banner hung above. No crown rested on its seat. The throne was empty. The man stood before it for a long while. He had expected someone, a ruler, a judge, a god, a final old man with yet another cryptic habit and probably disappointing soup. But there was no one. Only the throne, only silence. Then understanding arrived slowly, which was considerate, because sudden understanding often knocks furniture over. He had come beyond the world, looking for what stood at the edge of all things, some final meaning, some hidden master, some hand that had drawn the road, shaped the mountains, taught the sea its strange breathing, and placed questions like stones before travelers. And here was the answer: an empty seat. Not because nothing mattered, because no single thing could sit there. No king could rule all longing. No priest could bless every question. No scholar could bind mystery into one tidy book and charge extra for the binding. The throne waited for every answer humans tried to crown: power, glory, wisdom, escape, love, memory. Each sat there for a moment in someone's heart. Each failed to remain king forever. The man laughed softly, not mockery, relief. "All this way," he whispered, "and the throne is vacant." His voice moved across the terraces below. For a moment, the abandoned objects stirred. The stringless harp gave one silent shiver. The rusted sword flashed with old sunlight. The begging bowl filled briefly with rain that vanished before spilling. Then the throne spoke, not in words, in weight. The man felt every question that had carried him. Why leave? Why continue? What remains? What will you not surrender? And beneath them, the question hidden from the beginning: what did you hope would answer you? He sat on the lowest step before the throne, not on the throne itself. He was not that tired, and not that foolish. He thought of the village, the road, the people whose faces were gone, but whose kindness remained. He thought of his own pride, left as brown cloth before the keeper's gate. He thought of the city he could not carry, the river he had answered, the mirror that had shown him the man he had once been. "I hoped," he said slowly, "that something larger than me would make my wanting feel less lonely." The plane listened. The empty throne did not comfort him. It did something better. It did not lie. Wanting was lonely sometimes. Curiosity was lonely. Grief was lonely. Even wonder could be lonely when there was no one beside you to nudge and say, "Well, that's odd," which frankly is one of humanity's finest spiritual practices. He bowed his head. The 3 notes slipped from his mouth. Softly. The air changed. From somewhere far below the terraces, another note answered. Then, another. Not the rest of the song. A harmony. The objects around the throne began to glow faintly, each with its own pale light. Not bright, not grand. Just enough to show that every abandoned answer had once warmed someone's hands. The man understood then that meaning was not a king. It was a gathering, a hearth built from many small burnings. No single flame ruled it. No single flame was worthless. He rose. At the base of the throne lay a shallow carving he had not noticed before. A road becoming a circle, then opening again. Beside it were words cut so finely into stone that he had to kneel to read them. "No one sits here long." He smiled. Good. The throne remained empty, and because it remained empty, he felt no need to conquer, worship, or flee it. He placed his hand upon one arm of the black stone. It was warm, human warm, as if many hands had rested there before his. He did not ask for a crown. He did not ask for certainty. He asked only, in the private chamber of his heart, to remember that small things mattered even where great mysteries stood silent. The throne gave no answer, but the 3 notes in him steadied. When he turned away, the terraces had shifted. A new stairway descended west, made of pale steps. He was certain had not been there before. Beyond them, in the far distance, he saw a soft golden brightness, not like the last horizon, gentler, almost familiar. The road home, perhaps, or another test, wearing a friendly cloak, because roads had appalling manners that way. The man began descending. Behind him, the throne of no king waited in silence, empty and complete. And for the first time since crossing beyond the world, he felt that emptiness was not always absence. Sometimes it was room. The pale steps led him down from the throne. They were shallow, smooth, and much easier on the knees than they had any right to be. After everything else, the man distrusted them immediately. Comfortable stairs in an impossible realm were either a kindness or a trap, and in his experience, the difference often depended on whether one noticed too late. Still, he descended. The golden brightness ahead grew wider. It did not blaze. It breathed. Warm light pooled at the bottom of the stairway, spreading across the plain like late afternoon sunlight on harvest fields. For the first time in a long while, the air carried a familiar scent. Smoke, bread, rain on packed earth. His chest tightened. Home had begun appearing before him, not as memory, but as invitation. At the foot of the stairs stood a doorway. No wall, no frame except 2 wooden posts and a lintel worn smooth by hands. It looked like the entrance to an ordinary cottage, except beyond it, he could see his village lane in morning light. There were the low houses, the crooked fence near the smithy, the hill beyond the fields. A rooster strutted across the road with the unbearable confidence of a creature who believed dawn was personally his achievement. The man nearly laughed. Then he nearly wept. A figure stood beside the doorway. The old traveler, the same one who had arrived months ago in his village with dusty boots, an ancient cloak, and the terrible sentence that had opened the road inside him. He looked no older, no younger. His face, unlike so many others, remained clear. "You came far," the old traveler said. The man's voice felt rough. "You knew I would? I hoped you might. That is not the same." "No," said the old traveler. "It is kinder." The man looked past him at the village. "Is that truly home?" "It can be." "Can be?" "Doors are honest only after crossing." That sounded exactly like him. Mysterious, mildly irritating, and probably correct. An eccentric belief among wandering friars claimed that every road home was shorter in distance, but longer in meaning. This was why, they said, returning pilgrims often walked slowly near their own doors, not from tired feet, but because the soul arrived a few steps behind and needed time to catch up. The man touched the wooden post. It felt real, splintered, warm. He could hear voices beyond it. A woman calling to a child, a hammer striking iron, someone laughing at a joke that had probably been told poorly and received generously. "If I return," he said, "what happens to what I have seen?" The old traveler folded his hands inside his sleeves. "You keep enough." "Enough for whom?" "For a life." That answer frightened him more than loss. He turned away from the doorway and looked back across the impossible realm. The throne was no longer visible. Neither were the hills, the river, the grove, the field of stones, the last horizon, yet he felt them there, layered behind him like rooms in a house whose doors had closed but not vanished. "And if I stay?" The old traveler's gaze softened. "Then you become part of beyond." "What does that mean?" "You would no longer need home." The man swallowed. That was not horror. That was temptation. To no longer ache for return. To no longer fear forgetting. To walk forever in wonder, free from muddy lanes, gossiping neighbors, bad roofs, empty stomachs, and the deeply unreasonable behavior of goats. Beyond the doorway, the village glowed, small, fragile, ordinary. He understood now that ordinary things were not lesser. They were merely easier to overlook because they did not arrive, wearing crowns or speaking in riddles. Still, part of him wanted to stay. The impossible realm held vastness, silence, beauty untouched by bargaining, harvest failures, winter coughs, and men arguing with geese as though honor itself depended on cabbage rights. He could walk forever. Perhaps he would find the beginning of roads. Perhaps he would remember the whole lost song. Perhaps he would become light enough that nothing could wound him. The old traveler watched him kindly. "You returned once," the man said. "I did. Why?" The old traveler smiled, and for the first time, sadness entered his face plainly. "Because wonders are poor company when no one living can be told." The man closed his eyes. There it was, the unbearable knowledge. Not secret answers, not divine commands, not maps of heaven. Only this: the world was wider than anyone knew, stranger than any priest could preach, more delicate than any king could own. And still, somehow, the smallest village mattered. A broom, a crust, a song, a cracked cup, a hill at dawn. To return with that knowledge would hurt, because no one would fully believe him, because words belonged to the world, and beyond had made them clumsy. Because he might spend the rest of his days watching people treat small things carelessly, knowing they were not small at all. He asked, "Will I be happy?" The old traveler chuckled. "Not always. That was never offered." "Useful. Honest." The man looked at his hands. They seemed older. The lines deeper, the knuckles rougher, the nails dark with dust from places that should not exist. These hands had touched the road beyond memory, the river without return, the throne of no king. They had also mended fences, carried grain, held stale bread. Both truths lived in them. At last, he understood the choice was not between wonder and home. It was between endless seeking and becoming answerable to what he had already found. He stepped toward the doorway, then stopped. "What must I give to pass back?" The old traveler nodded as if pleased. "Something always asks." "What?" "The comfort of being believed." The words settled quietly. He saw his future then, not clearly, but enough. He would tell the tale. Some would laugh. Some would pity him. Some would lean closer. Children would remember pieces. Old women would nod at parts they already knew. Men at market would say he had slept too near mushrooms. Honestly, fair. He would never prove it. No token remained. No map. No crown from the empty throne. Only a story, and himself changed by it. He breathed in. "I give it." The doorway brightened. The old traveler stepped aside. The man crossed. For a moment, he felt everything stretch. The last horizon, the river's question, the faceless island, the forgotten city, the whispering mountains, the first muddy road. Then all of it folded inward, not gone, but hidden deep. His boots touched village earth. Morning sounds surrounded him. The rooster glared as though deeply offended by mystical arrivals before breakfast. The man laughed softly. Behind him, the doorway was only sunlight between two cottages. No old traveler stood there. No golden plain. Only dust turning slowly in the air. He had chosen the way home. And already, he knew the hardest part of the journey had just begun. For several breaths, no one noticed him. That felt strange. After crossing beyond the world, answering rivers, standing before an empty throne, and surrendering the comfort of being believed, a man might reasonably expect at least one dramatic gasp. Perhaps a child pointing. Perhaps the rooster bowing in recognition of cosmic significance. The rooster did not bow. It pecked at the dirt and strutted away, which was probably healthier for everyone. The village morning moved around him exactly as mornings always had. Smoke rose from chimneys. A cart creaked past carrying turnips. Somewhere, a woman scolded someone named Hal for losing a bucket, and Hal defended himself with the weak confidence of a man who had absolutely lost the bucket. The traveler stood in the lane with dust on his cloak and worlds inside his silence. Then a boy saw him. The child stared. "You're back." The man nodded. "I am. You look older. That happens when one walks. My uncle walked to the next valley and only came back drunk. A different road." The boy accepted this with the open-mindedness of children, who regularly believe frogs are princes, but adults are sensible, so their standards are flexible. Soon others gathered. Neighbors. He recognized by voice, by gesture, by the way they stood. Though some faces blurred at the edges, they asked where he had gone. They asked what he had seen. They asked whether he had brought news from the west, and whether the roads were safe, and whether bread cost more there, because people will drag practical concerns into any miracle if given half a chance. He tried to answer. Words failed immediately. He spoke of mountains that whispered. A farmer laughed nervously. He described a sea no map had named. Someone asked whether the fish were good. He mentioned a city beyond memory. An old woman crossed herself and whispered that cities were always trouble. When he spoke of the throne with no king, the blacksmith frowned. "What use is a throne with no king?" The traveler smiled faintly. "More than you would think." That did not help. By evening, most had decided he was tired, strange, harmless, and probably in need of soup. This was not the worst judgment. Soup had comforted many dangerous ideas before they spread too quickly. He returned to his small house. It was dustier than he remembered. Smaller too, but not lesser. The door creaked. The hearth sat cold. His old tools lay where he had left them. A cracked cup waited on the shelf, plain and brown, containing nothing except the astonishing fact that it still existed. He touched it gently. For one moment, the forgotten city stirred in his mind. "I saw you." He whispered the words again, this time to the room. "I saw you." The room, being a room, did not reply. Still, it felt warmer. Days passed. He mended his fence. Badly at first. His hands remembered slower than they should have, and the fence seemed personally offended by his absence. A neighbor helped, pretending not to notice when the traveler stood too long, watching the western hills. He worked. He ate. He slept poorly. At night, he dreamed of water flowing uphill and woke with 3 notes on his tongue. He carved them into the underside of his table so they would not vanish entirely. It was a ridiculous place to keep a song, but then again, people hide precious things under floorboards, in walls, and inside their own stubborn hearts. A table was practically respectable. An eccentric belief among village carpenters claimed that tables remembered every story told above them. This was why some families refused to sell old tables, fearing their secrets might travel with the wood. The traveler liked that thought. It made furniture seem less dull, and frankly, furniture needed the encouragement. Weeks became months. The tale changed as it passed from mouth to mouth. Some said he had walked into fairyland. Others said he had gone mad from eating strange roots. One man insisted the traveler had been captured by moon monks, which sounded impressive, though no one could explain what moon monks wanted or whether they owned proper sandals. Children liked the version with the sea of stars. Old people liked the island of forgotten faces, though they grew quiet afterward. The blacksmith preferred the throne. "Still think it needs a king," he said once. "Most men do," the traveler answered. "And you?" "I think it was better empty." The blacksmith considered this while hammering a horseshoe. Strange opinion. Yes. Not useless, though. No. That was enough. The traveler never became famous. Not truly. A few pilgrims came to hear him speak. A scribe once tried writing the tale down, but grew angry because the road would not fit neatly into chapters. The traveler told him roads rarely care for clerks. The scribe left offended, proving the point beautifully. Years moved gently over the village. The traveler's hair grayed, his steps slowed. He did not leave again. Not because curiosity died. It simply changed shape. He found wonder in frost on fence rails, in bread rising, in children asking impossible questions before breakfast. He watched geese with the wary respect due to undefeated warriors. He listened to rain as though it might carry distant rivers inside it. Sometimes at dusk, he climbed the western hill. People said he was remembering. They were partly right. He was also witnessing. The hills remained where they had always been, blue and quiet beneath the sky. Beyond them lay roads, forests, seas, gates, lights, and an empty throne no one sat upon for long. He could not prove it. He no longer needed to. Near the end of his life, a young woman came to him with a cloak, a staff, and eyes fixed on the horizon. "Is there truly a road beyond the world?" she asked. The old man looked at her for a long time. He saw fear, pride, longing, the old ingredients. Then he smiled. "The world does not end," he said softly. "It simply becomes something else." She shivered. "What should I carry?" He thought of bread, salt, memory, pride, questions, and the comfort of being believed. Carry what you can lose, he said, and guard what you must not. She frowned. That sounds like a riddle. It is worse, he said. It is advice, she laughed. The next morning, she was gone. Years later, villagers claimed she returned changed, though others swore she never returned at all. That is how legends behave. They refuse to sit still, like cats, smoke, and badly supervised children. As for the man, when his final evening came, he rested beside his open door. The western sky glowed gold. A rooster complained somewhere in the lane. Someone baked bread. Someone laughed. Someone lost a bucket. The old man hummed 3 notes. This time, after a pause, the 4th note came. Then the 5th. Not the whole song, but enough. He smiled toward the hills. And in the quiet that followed, the story he had left behind began walking without him. So now, let the road grow soft beneath your thoughts. Let the hills fade into blue distance, and let the strange bright places settle gently where dreams know how to keep them. There is no need to hurry after the traveler now. He has gone as far as he needed, and what he brought back is resting safely in the hush between one breath and the next. The village grows dim. The fires burn low. The fields lie calm under the evening sky. Somewhere beyond sight, the road continues, but here, for this moment, nothing asks you to follow. You may simply listen. You may simply be warm. The door is closed against the cold. The cup is set beside the hearth, and every small, ordinary thing is allowed to matter. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your hands grow heavy. Let the day step away from you like a tired horse being led gently to water. The old man's song is quiet now, only a few notes drifting over the grass, soft enough not to wake anyone, steady enough to guide anyone who needs guiding. And far beyond the western hills, beneath a sky full of patient lights, an empty throne waits without demanding a king. A river keeps its question. A city remembers that it was seen. And the road, kind for once, does not call loudly. It only rests under the starlight, pale and peaceful, ready for another dreamer, another night, another beginning.